Hey guys, before we settle into tonight's journey, take a quiet second to like the video if you enjoy these slow walks through history, and if you're new here, you can subscribe whenever it feels right. I'd also love to know where you're listening from tonight. It always amazes me how many different corners of the world gather together before sleep. Now, dim the lights, set your phone somewhere comfortable, pull the blanket a little higher, take one slow breath, and let the noise of the modern world drift quietly away. The year is somewhere in the heart of the Vikings' age. There are no clocks, no engines, no glowing windows on distant streets, only darkness stretching across the cold northern sky. Broken by thousands of stars that seem impossibly close, the wind carries the smell of damp earth, pine forests, and salt drifting inland from a restless sea. Somewhere beyond the hills, waves break softly against rocky shores, but that world feels very far away now. Your world is much smaller. Tomorrow morning, before the first hint of sunrise, you will wake inside a wooden longhouse, not as a warrior, not as a king, not as one of the famous sailors whose names echo through sagas. You are something much quieter, a farmer. History remembers Viking raids. It remembers dragon-headed ships cutting across grey oceans. It remembers battles, burning monasteries, and fearless explorers. But most people never lived those stories. Most people spent their lives much closer to home, working soil that never became easier to tame. Your greatest enemy will rarely carry a sword. Instead, it will arrive as an early frost, a sick cow, a broken fence, a harvest that refuses to grow, or a winter that lasts just a little too long. Life here depends on hundreds of tiny decisions, each one almost invisible on its own. Plant a week too early, seeds may freeze. Wait too long, the growing season ends before the grain matures. Lose a single cow, your family may lose milk, butter, cheese, leather, and the strength needed to plow next spring. Everything is connected, nothing is guaranteed. The land offers enough, but only if you understand it. Around you, forests stand silent beneath towering spruce and birch. The trees seem endless, yet every log must still be cut by hand. Every field must first be won from wilderness. The soil hides stones beneath its surface like old secrets. Even after years of work, the earth always seems ready to reclaim everything people have built. It is a patient opponent, and it always has more time than you do. The air is colder than you expected. Even summer mornings carry a sharpness that settles into your lungs. Soon, you'll learn that warmth itself becomes a kind of treasure. Firewood, wool, animal hides, a well-built roof. Simple things become priceless when snow begins to fall. Listen carefully. The forest is not silent after all. Somewhere, an owl calls through the darkness. Farther away, sheep shuffle inside a rough enclosure. A dog lifts its head for only a moment before curling back into sleep. Inside the longhouse, dozens of quiet sounds blend together. Wood settles, someone turns beneath a heavy wool blanket. A child murmurs in a dream. The fire breathes softly from the central hearth, its glowing embers painting gentle orange light across thick timber beams blackened by years of smoke. This building is far more than shelter. It is warmth, safety, a memory. Every beam was raised by hands that hoped their children would survive another winter. Every scar in the wood tells a story that no saga ever recorded. Tomorrow, before dawn, you will step outside for the first time. The land will still be wrapped in mist. Your boots will sink into damp grass. The work will begin almost immediately, and before long, you may realize something surprising. Surviving as a Viking farmer demands a different kind of courage than sailing into battle. One is remembered by songs, the other quietly keeps an entire world alive. As the fire crackles lower and sleep gently settles over the farm, the darkness beyond the walls slowly begins to soften, hinting that somewhere beyond the eastern hills, the first light of morning is already preparing to arrive. Morning does not arrive with a loud announcement, it begins as a quiet change in the darkness. The stars, so brilliant only moments ago, slowly surrender to a pale grey sky. The moon fades behind a thin veil of drifting clouds, and the world seems to hold its breath between night and day. Even before your eyes open, you feel the cold pressing gently through the timber walls of the longhouse. The fire in the center of the room has nearly died. Only a few glowing embers remain beneath a blanket of white ash, giving off just enough warmth to remind everyone why the hearth was built at the heart of the home. A faint scent of smoke lingers in the air, woven together with drying herbs hanging from the rafters and the familiar smell of wool, wood, and damp leather. Someone nearby shifts beneath a blanket, another person coughs softly, a child yawns, still clinging to sleep. Then, without a single word being spoken, the household begins to wake. No bell rings, no rooster proudly declares the hour. Instead, years of habit guide every movement. In a place where daylight is precious and growing seasons are painfully short, sleeping late is a luxury no family can afford. You push aside your heavy wool blanket and sit up slowly. The floor beneath your feet is cool, packed earth covered in scattered reeds that soften each step. The chill reaches through your boots before you have fully stood. Outside, the world is waiting. Whether you are ready or not, someone kneels beside the hearth, carefully blowing life back into the glowing coals. A tiny flame appears, another piece of dry wood is added. Within moments, the fire begins to breathe again, sending soft orange light dancing across the walls. Shadows stretch and retreat as if the house itself is waking from sleep. The warmth spreads slowly. There is no hurry. Everything on a Viking farm follows a rhythm shaped by nature rather than urgency. Breakfast is simple. Yesterday's barley bread has grown firm overnight, but no one complains. Thick slices are warmed near the fire. A little butter, carefully saved from the previous day's churning, softens against the warm crust. There may be dried fish from the coast, smoked meat from last season, or a bowl of sour milk that has remained fresh in the cool air. Nothing is wasted. Every bite carries the memory of work already completed. You eat quietly, listening more than speaking. Outside, the first birds begin their morning songs. Their calls echo through the damp valley, answered by distant sheep and the deep, familiar lowing of cattle waiting to be fed. Somewhere beyond the trees, water trickles over stones, swollen by spring rains or melting snow depending on the season. The farm is coming alive. You pull on a thick wool tunic, fastening it with a simple brooch worn smooth by years of use. A leather belt holds a small knife, not as a weapon, but as a tool used countless times each day. Every item of clothing has been spun, woven, stitched, and repaired by careful hands. Even your boots tell a story, patched more than once because replacing them is far harder than mending them. Stepping outside, the cold morning air fills your lungs, mist drifts lazily across the fields, wrapping the land in silver ribbons. Dew sparkles on every blade of grass, catching the first rays of sunlight creeping over distant hills. Wooden fences emerge slowly from the fog, their weathered posts standing like quiet guardians around the farm. The longhouse looks different in daylight. Smoke curls gently from the roof vent, disappearing into the still morning sky. Nearby stand smaller buildings, a byre for cattle, a storehouse raised above the ground to keep food safe from dampness and hungry animals, and rough shelters where tools wait patiently for another day's work. The dog is already awake. It circles the yard with practiced confidence, pausing only to sniff the cool air before trotting toward the livestock pens. The animals know the routine as well as the people. Sheep crowd together near the gate, goats test the fences with curious noses, and the cattle wait with patient eyes that seem almost thoughtful. Their care cannot be delayed. A hungry animal grows weaker, a neglected fence becomes tomorrow's escape. Every sunrise brings responsibilities that cannot simply be postponed. You gather a wooden bucket and walk toward the well. The rope creaks as it lowers into the darkness. Moments later, cool water splashes against the sides as you pull it back toward the surface. Each careful movement reminding you that even something as ordinary as water demands effort. Nothing on this farm arrives easily. Not warmth, not food, not comfort. Even peace must be earned each day through quiet, steady labor. Yet there is something deeply reassuring about this rhythm. The same mist rises each morning. The same birds greet the dawn. The same path leads from the longhouse to the fields, worn smooth by countless footsteps stretching back through generations. You are becoming part of that path now. Each sunrise ties you a little more closely to the land beneath your feet, and as the golden light slowly spreads across the waiting fields, your eyes drift toward the rugged hills beyond the farm, where the question of exactly which piece of this unforgiving landscape is truly worth claiming quietly begins to take shape. The morning's first chores gradually settle into a steady rhythm. The animals have been fed. Fresh water stands in wooden buckets beside the longhouse. Smoke rises peacefully from the hearth, disappearing into a sky that promises fair weather, at least for today. Now your attention drifts beyond the familiar fences, beyond the grazing fields, beyond the places your feet already know, because before a Viking farmer can truly belong to the land itself must first be chosen, and in the far north, that choice is rarely simple. It would be easy to imagine endless empty wilderness waiting for anyone willing to claim it. The truth is quieter and far more uncertain. Every promising meadow hides a problem. Every peaceful valley carries a question that only time can answer. You climb a gentle hillside where the morning mist still clings to the earth. From here, the landscape unfolds in every direction like a great patchwork stitched together by forests, rivers, rocky ridges, and scattered fields carved from the wilderness by generations before you. It is beautiful, but beauty alone has never filled a granary. The first thing you learn is to look at the water, not the sea, not the rivers that flood with spring snowmelt, but the smaller streams that flow patiently throughout the year. A dependable stream means drinking water for people, livestock, and crops. It can power a small mill in fortunate places, nourish nearby grasslands, and offer fish when harvests fail. Yet even water can become an enemy. Choose land too close to a river, and one violent spring flood may carry away fences, fields, and months of hard work in a single afternoon. The safest ground lies just high enough to escape the floods, but not so high that every bucket of water becomes an exhausting climb. Every decision asks for balance. You kneel and scoop up a handful of dark soil. It feels rich, soft, full of life, but only a few steps away, your fingers strike stone hidden beneath a thin layer of earth. Much of this northern land keeps its secrets buried just below the surface. Before a single seed can be planted, countless rocks must be lifted by hand. Some are no larger than your fist, others refuse to move at all, forcing fields to grow around them for generations. Even today, scattered stone walls stretch across old Viking landscapes, not built for beauty, but simply because every stubborn rock had to be placed somewhere. You continue walking. The forest grows thicker. Towering pines whisper softly as the wind passes through their branches. Birch trees shimmer with pale bark that catches the growing sunlight. These forests are both generous and demanding. They provide timber for homes, firewood for long winters, Wood for fences, wagons, tools, and boats. Game animals wander beneath the trees, offering meat and hides when fortune smiles, yet every tree standing here is also one more obstacle between your family and another field. Clearing forest is slow work. Axes bite deep into trunks day after day, roots cling stubbornly beneath the earth long after the trees themselves have fallen. Sometimes smoke rises from controlled fires, carefully burning away brush before new grass can grow. Even then, nature never truly surrenders. Leave a field untended for only a few years, the forest quietly begins its return. As you walk farther, the wind becomes stronger. You pause on a rocky ridge overlooking distant hills. The view is magnificent, but the cold breeze reminds you of another lesson. Shelter matters. A farm exposed to relentless northern winds loses precious warmth during winter. Snow piles against buildings. Roofs strain beneath icy storms. Wise farmers often choose land protected by forests or gentle hills, letting nature itself become a shield against the harshest weather. The old people speak often of watching the land before trusting it, not for hours, for seasons. Where does the snow melt first? Which fields stay wet after rain? Where does frost linger longest? Where do wild flowers bloom earliest? The landscape is always speaking. Patient farmers simply learn how to listen. Even the animals offer advice. Deer choose certain paths through the woods. Birds nest where food is plentiful. Sheep naturally seek dry, sheltered ground when storms approach. Long before written maps became common, people studied these quiet signs with remarkable care. Nothing is random. Every hill, every marsh, every patch of sunlight tells part of the story. By midday, your boots carry traces of mud, moss, and crushed grass. Your hands smell faintly of fresh earth and pine resin. The land no longer feels like empty wilderness. It feels alive, complicated, almost thoughtful. You begin to understand why families often remained on the same farms for generations. Finding suitable land is difficult. Learning its moods takes a lifetime. Mastering them may take several. As the afternoon light grows warmer, you stand once more overlooking the valley below. The place no longer appears wild. Instead, you can almost imagine fences stretching across the meadows. Animals grazing peacefully, smoke rising from a sturdy longhouse. By the time another dawn quietly washes across the northern sky, the decision has already been made. The valley below is no longer simply a stretch of wilderness. In your mind, you can already see a home where only trees now stand. You can almost hear the gentle sounds of livestock where birds still rule the morning. The empty ground has begun to feel familiar, even though nothing built by human hands yet exists there. But imagining a farm and creating one are separated by months of relentless labor. You stand at the edge of the forest with an axe resting across your shoulder. The trees before you are old. Some have watched generations come and go. Their trunks rise high into the cool morning air, their branches weaving together into a roof of green that softens the sunlight. The forest feels peaceful, almost welcoming, yet every towering pine reminds you that this land will not become a farm willingly. It must be persuaded, one careful swing at a time. The first strike echoes farther than expected. A sharp crack breaks the silence before disappearing into the woods. Birds lift into the sky. Somewhere deeper among the trees, a deer slips quietly away, vanishing between the shadows. The forest notices your arrival. The work quickly settles into a slow rhythm. Lift, swing, pause, breathe. Each blow bites only a little deeper into the trunk. Iron is precious, and your axe must be treated with care. You sharpen its edge whenever it begins to dull, knowing that a damaged tool can cost valuable days of work. Hours pass almost unnoticed. Tiny wood chips gather around your boots, your shoulders grow warm despite the cool northern air, your hands begin to ache. Finally, the tree groans, its weight shifts almost imperceptibly before the entire trunk leans with graceful slowness. Branches brush against neighboring trees, and then the great pine falls with a deep, rolling crash that shakes the earth beneath your feet. One tree, only one. Looking across the untouched forest, you suddenly understand how enormous this task truly is. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, must still be cleared before sunlight can fully reach the ground. Yet every fallen tree is also a gift, nothing is wasted. Straight trunks become the sturdy walls of your future longhouse, smaller logs will support barns and sheds, branches become fences, twigs feed cooking fires, even bark can find new purpose. The forest gives generously, provided you are willing to work for every piece. Gradually, patches of open sky begin appearing where thick branches once blocked the sun, light reaches the forest floor, grass begins returning. Wildflowers emerge from places hidden beneath years of shade. The land slowly changes its appearance, almost as though it is taking its first careful breath. Building the longhouse comes next. Its foundation is simple by modern standards but demands remarkable precision. Large stones are placed carefully beneath the heavy timbers to lift the wooden walls above damp ground. Without them, moisture would slowly rot the beams long before their time. Neighbors arrive to help. No single family raises a longhouse alone. Strong hands lift massive logs together using ropes, wooden levers, and quiet determination. There is surprisingly little shouting. Everyone understands the work. Each movement has been practiced across countless farms throughout the north. The frame rises steadily, massive oak and pine beams locked together without nails, relying instead on carefully carved joints that fit so perfectly they seem almost grown rather than built. Above, the roof takes shape. Thick wooden rafters stretch overhead before being covered with layers of birch bark and dense turf cut from nearby meadows. Soon, grass will grow naturally across the roof itself. From a distance, the house will appear almost part of the hillside, nature and shelter blending into one another. Inside, the space remains surprisingly open. A long central hearth divides the room. Smoke will drift upward toward vents beneath the roof, although much of it will linger indoors, slowly preserving the timber while filling everything with the familiar scent of wood fire. Sleeping platforms line the walls, simple wooden chests hold precious belongings. Nothing feels extravagant. Everything has a purpose. Outside, more buildings gradually appear. A byre protects cattle during winter. A raised storehouse guards precious grain from moisture and hungry mice. Small workshops provide space for repairing tools through long evenings when darkness arrives early. Even the fences demand patience. Every post must be cut, every rail shaped, every gate fitted securely. A weak fence invites wandering livestock. And wandering livestock invite endless trouble. As days become weeks, the clearing begins to resemble something entirely different. Children gather fallen branches into neat piles. Older family members smooth rough timber with hand tools polished by years of use. Smoke curls peacefully above the finished roof each evening. The sound of axes grows less frequent. Instead, quieter sounds begin to replace them. A bucket set beside the well. A wooden door closing gently, footsteps crossing. Packed earth, laughter carried softly on the evening breeze. For the first time, this no longer feels like borrowed land, it feels like home, not because every task has been completed. Far from it, the hardest work still lies ahead. A house alone cannot feed a family. The surrounding earth now waits patiently, untouched and expectant, ready for the long cycle of farming that will soon begin, where every season will demand something different. and every passing month will quietly shape the rhythm of your entire life. The new farm no longer feels silent. Smoke rises from the longhouse each morning with comforting familiarity. The fences stand firm against wandering animals. The roof has settled through its first rains, and the timber walls have begun to carry the warm scent of wood fire and everyday life. At last, the place breathes like a home. But a Viking farmer soon discovers that a farm does not truly belong to its people. It belongs to the seasons. The year is not measured by numbered months. It is measured by what the land quietly asks of you. Each season arrives with its own voice, its own work, and its own quiet warning. Ignore that rhythm for too long, and the farm gently reminds you that nature is far less forgiving than any neighbor. Spring is always the first to arrive with hope. The snow retreats slowly, reluctant to leave the valleys where it has rested for months. Streams awaken beneath melting ice, carrying fresh water through fields still damp from winter. The air smells different now, rich earth replacing the sharp scent of frost. You step into the fields while they are still soft beneath your boots. The ground must be inspected carefully. Winter storms may have shifted stones into the soil. Floodwater may have carved away part of a field. Fallen branches scattered by heavy winds must be gathered before the real work can begin. Even before planting, the land demands attention. Nothing begins all at once. One fence is repaired, another gate is straightened, a ditch is cleared so spring rain can escape instead of drowning young crops. Each small task prepares the farm for everything that follows. Then comes the season of sowing. You carry a simple wooden basket filled with precious grain saved from last year's harvest. Every handful is valuable. Scatter too much, and food is wasted. Scatter too little, and the harvest may disappoint. With slow, practiced movements, your hand sweeps across the field. The seeds fall like quiet rain. There is no machine to guarantee perfect rows, only experience, years of watching the wind, years of understanding the soil beneath your feet. Then, you wait. Waiting is perhaps the hardest work of all. No amount of effort can force a seed to grow. The earth follows its own pace. Some mornings you walk the field simply to look. Tiny green shoots begin pushing through the dark soil almost shyly, as though unsure whether the cold has truly gone. Each one feels like a small promise. Summer arrives almost without warning. The days stretch longer than seems possible. Sunrise comes early. Darkness waits patiently until late evening. The farm hums with quiet activity from dawn until the last light disappears beyond the hills. Grass must be cut while it is rich and green. Hay dries beneath the warm sun before being gathered into careful stacks that will feed animals through the coming winter. Children help turn the drying grass with wooden forks. Older hands judge the weather with remarkable accuracy, knowing that one unexpected rainstorm can spoil days of careful work. The livestock grows strong. Calves stumble across fresh pastures. Lambs chase one another through fields filled with wildflowers. Even the cattle seem calmer beneath the gentle warmth of the northern summer. Yet summer is never a season of rest. Weeds creep silently among the crops, fences loosen, tools wear down. There is always another task waiting quietly around the corner. Soon the color of the fields begins to change. Green slowly gives way to shades of gold. The grain bends gently beneath its own weight. Autumn has arrived. Now every hour matters. Families rise before sunrise and remain in the fields until fading light makes work impossible. Sickles sweep through the barley with steady rhythm, gathering the harvest one careful bundle at a time. The air fills with the comforting smell of dry straw. Birds circle overhead, hoping for forgotten kernels. Every arm is needed. Even younger children gather fallen stalks that might otherwise be lost. There is satisfaction in watching the granary slowly fill. Months of careful labor now stand stacked neatly behind wooden walls. For a brief moment, the farm feels generous. Then winter quietly reminds everyone that the work has only changed its shape. Snow blankets the fields where grain once swayed in the breeze. The earth finally rests, but the people rarely do. Animals still require feeding, tools must be repaired beside the fire, leather is stitched, wood is carved. Clothing is mended beneath the soft glow of the hearth. Stories pass slowly from one generation to the next while the wind hums gently outside the walls. The farm becomes smaller during winter, gathered closely around warmth and light. Then, almost before you notice, the snow begins to soften once again. Water trickles beneath the ice. Birdsong returns. Another year quietly circles back to its beginning. You realize something comforting. The rhythm never truly ends. It simply keeps turning, season after season, generation after generation. Asking the same quiet question of every farmer who calls this place home: can you keep pace with the land, without ever trying to rush it? As another spring approaches, your eyes turn toward the waiting pasture, where the cattle lift their heads toward the morning sun, reminding you that the farm's greatest wealth has never been its fields alone, but the living animals that depend upon your care every single day. Another morning settles gently across the farm. The fields glisten beneath a layer of fresh dew, and a cool breeze carries the scent of damp grass through the open yard. Sunlight slowly climbs over the surrounding hills, painting the roofs with soft shades of gold while the last wisps of mist drift lazily toward the forest. Today, before a single tool touches the fields, your attention belongs elsewhere. Soft sounds are already rising from the byre, a patient lowing, the quiet bleat of sheep, the curious call of a goat waiting for someone to open the gate. These are not simply animals to a Viking farmer. They are the heartbeat of the entire farm. Without them, the carefully built homestead would struggle to survive even a single difficult winter. You slide back the heavy wooden door of the byre. Warm air greets you immediately. The building carries its own familiar scent, a mixture of fresh hay, warm breath, damp earth, and clean straw spread across the floor. Compared to the crisp air outside, the shelter feels surprisingly comfortable. The cattle turn their heads as you enter. Large, calm eyes watch every movement with quiet recognition. These are not enormous animals by modern standards. Viking cattle are smaller, sturdy creatures shaped by generations of harsh northern weather. They waste little energy and ask for little luxury. Even so, they are among the family's greatest treasures. A healthy cow offers milk each day. Milk becomes butter. Butter becomes valuable food through the cold months. Milk also becomes cheese, a gift that lasts long after fresh food has disappeared beneath winter snow. Nothing is taken for granted. You reach out, gently resting a hand against the warm neck of an old brown cow. She has survived many winters. You can almost imagine that she understands the routine better than anyone else. Outside, the sheep have grown impatient. As the gate swings open, they step into the morning pasture in a slow, wool-covered wave. Their bells make quiet, uneven music as they wander across the hillside. Unlike the cattle, sheep ask for very little: grass, open space, and protection from wolves when darkness falls. In return, they provide something every northern family depends upon: wool. Soft, warm, endlessly useful wool, long before heavy winter winds arrive. Every fleece will be carefully sheared by hand. The work demands patience rather than speed. A careless cut may injure the animal. A hurried hand wastes valuable fibers. The wool is cleaned in cool streams, dried beneath the summer sun, spun into thread, and finally woven into thick clothing capable of standing against the northern cold. As you watch the sheep disappear across the meadow, it becomes easy to understand why a fine wool cloak may be valued almost as highly as silver. Nearby, The goats have entirely different ideas about the morning. One has already climbed onto a weathered tree stump simply because it can. Another stretches its neck toward a low branch, nibbling leaves just beyond easy reach. Goats possess endless curiosity. If a gate contains even the smallest gap, they will find it. If a fence seems impossible to climb, they may still try. More than once, a Viking farmer has spent half a morning chasing an adventurous goat through neighboring fields, yet no one stays angry for long. Goats reward patience with rich milk that thrives even where cattle struggle. They happily eat shrubs, weeds, and rough plants ignored by almost every other animal in difficult years. That stubborn independence becomes priceless. As the morning grows brighter, the entire pasture slowly comes alive. Calves stumble beside their mothers with uncertain steps. Young lambs leap through patches of wildflowers for reasons known only to themselves. Birds settle comfortably among grazing cattle, searching for insects disturbed by careful hooves. Even the dog seems calmer here, quietly circling the herd before lying beneath the shade of an old birch tree. There is harmony in these small moments. Not perfection. One animal limps slightly after stepping on a sharp stone. Another refuses to leave the shade. A calf wanders farther than it should before being gently guided back. The farm is filled with tiny problems that require quiet attention rather than panic. The older farmers often say that healthy animals speak without words. Bright eyes, steady breathing, a smooth coat, a good appetite. These signs tell you far more than any written record ever could. So each morning, you learn to observe before acting, to notice, to listen, to understand. As afternoon settles softly over the hills, fresh hay is carried into the byre, water buckets are filled once again, and every gate is checked before evening approaches. A loose latch may seem insignificant now. Until darkness falls, predators are patient. Storms arrive without warning. A single forgotten chore may carry consequences that last for weeks. As the sun begins its slow descent, the livestock gradually return toward the safety of the farmyard. The cattle move with quiet confidence. The sheep gather together almost instinctively. Even the goats, after one last curious adventure, reluctantly follow behind, watching them disappear into the shelter. You begin to understand something your neighbors have known all along. Fields may feed the animals, but the animals, in countless unseen ways, quietly feed the future of the farm itself. And tomorrow, with the strength of cattle waiting patiently beside the barn, the hardest work the land can offer will finally begin, breaking the earth itself with nothing more than muscle, determination, and the simplest of tools. The livestock have done their part. They have carried the farm through another quiet morning, filling the air with familiar sounds and reminding you that life here depends on many steady rhythms working together. Now, your attention returns to the land itself. The fields lie waiting beyond the fences, still damp from the night's cool air. A light mist hangs close to the earth, slowly lifting as the first warmth of the sun spreads across the valley. From a distance, the soil appears calm, almost inviting, but appearances are often deceptive. Beneath that dark surface waits a stubborn world of tangled roots, buried stones, hardened clay, and countless seasons of untouched earth. Before grain can grow, the land must first be persuaded to open. You walk toward the edge of the field where the plow has rested since the previous autumn. Compared to modern machines, it seems almost unbelievably simple. The sturdy wooden frame, an iron-tipped blade, carefully forged by a skilled blacksmith, long handles polished smooth by years of hard-working hands. There is no engine waiting to roar into life, only craftsmanship and patience. The plow is inspected carefully. Before anything else, a loose peg is tightened. The iron point is checked for cracks. Leather straps are adjusted where they will soon connect to the animals. Every part matters. If something breaks halfway across the field, Valuable daylight may disappear before repairs can be made. Nearby, two patient oxen stand quietly beneath the cool morning sky, broad-shouldered and calm. They are among the strongest workers on the farm. Unlike swift horses, oxen move without hurry. Their strength lies not in speed but in steady endurance. They lower their heads as the wooden yoke is gently placed across their necks. The leather harness creaks softly. One animal exhales a slow cloud of warm breath into the chilly air. Everything feels unhurried. There is no need to rush what cannot be rushed. With a quiet word and a gentle tug on the reins, the oxen lean forward. The plow resists at first. The earth clings stubbornly to itself, reluctant to be disturbed after months of winter stillness. Then, the blade bites, dark soil slowly rolls aside. A fresh furrow appears behind you. Rich earth that has not seen sunlight in many months now greets the morning air. The scent rises immediately. It is deep, moist, almost sweet, the unmistakable smell of living soil. You grip the handles firmly. Keeping the plow straight demands constant attention. Too shallow, and the seeds will struggle. Too deep, and the animals waste precious energy. The ground offers little forgiveness. Roots catch the blade. Hidden stones jar the handles sharply against your palms. Every few steps, the plow must be lifted slightly to free it from another obstacle. Buried beneath the surface, some rocks are removed immediately and carried to the edge of the field. Others are simply too large. Generation after generation, farmers have learned to guide their furrows around these ancient stones rather than fight them. By midday, the first field begins to transform. Long, dark lines stretch across the earth like careful brushstrokes on a vast canvas. The work is repetitive, yet strangely peaceful. Walk, guide, lift, turn. Another quiet conversation between people, animals, and earth. By evening, the light softens into warm shades of amber. The newly plowed field stretches before you, no longer wild and untouched but carefully prepared for the next stage of its long journey. It is still only bare soil, yet within those dark rows lies the possibility of bread, ale, warm porridge, and another winter survived. You wipe the last traces of earth from your hands and gently remove the yoke from the waiting oxen. Their work, like yours, is finished for today. Together, you walk slowly back toward the farm while the first cool breeze of evening moves across the waiting fields. Tomorrow, those freshly opened furrows will receive something even more precious than hard work: tiny handfuls of barley, rye, and oats, each seed carrying the quiet hope that the earth will answer your labor with life. The motion soon becomes almost meditative. You are not merely planting food, you are placing your confidence into the earth itself. Among all the crops a Viking farmer knows, barley holds a special place. It is dependable, strong, capable of surviving the cool northern climate better than many other grains. From barley comes warm porridge on cold mornings, fresh bread baked upon flat stones, and perhaps most famously, ale. Clean drinking water is not always guaranteed, but carefully brewed ale provides both nourishment and safety. Even children sometimes drink weak ale prepared with far less strength than that shared during gatherings. A good barley harvest brings quiet comfort throughout the year. Not far away, another field waits for rye. Rye is less demanding than barley. Where poorer soil refuses richer crops, rye often continues growing with quiet determination. Its roots reach deeply into the earth, finding strength where other plants might surrender. The bread made from rye is darker, heavier, and wonderfully filling. After long hours of labor, few meals are more welcome. Beyond that lies a smaller field where oats will soon take root. To modern eyes, oats may seem ordinary. To a Viking farmer, they are another quiet blessing. They feed both people and livestock. A bowl of oat porridge warms the body before dawn's first chores. Extra grain strengthens animals through difficult seasons. Very little is ever wasted, every crop has its purpose, every field tells its own story. Days slowly become weeks. At first, nothing seems to happen. The fields appear unchanged beneath passing clouds and gentle rain. It would be easy to believe the seeds have disappeared forever, but nature works patiently, far beyond human sight. One cool morning, while walking the familiar paths, you notice tiny green shoots breaking through the soil, so small they almost escape attention, yet suddenly the entire landscape feels different. Life has answered, not all at once, not dramatically, quietly, exactly as it always has. Soon, thin green carpets begin spreading across the valley. Each field develops its own color and texture. Barley sways with graceful softness whenever the breeze passes. Rye grows taller, standing proudly against the wind. Oats shimmer beneath changing sunlight, their slender stems dancing almost effortlessly. The farm feels alive in an entirely new way. Yet growing grain demands far more than simply waiting. Weeds appear almost overnight. Some steal precious nutrients, others block sunlight from young crops. You move carefully between the rows, pulling unwanted plants by hand before they spread farther. It is slow work, patient work, the kind of labor that often goes unnoticed until it is neglected. Rain arrives, sometimes gently, sometimes with enough force to flatten young plants against the earth. The fields drink gratefully after dry weeks, yet too much water carries its own dangers. Storm clouds are watched with cautious respect, so are clear skies that remain cloudless for too many days. Neither abundance nor scarcity guarantees success. The balance between them is everything. Birds soon discover the ripening fields. Sparrows flutter through the grain searching for easy meals. Ravens perch nearby, watching with remarkable intelligence. You fashion simple scarecrows from old clothing and wooden poles. Sometimes they help, sometimes the birds simply grow accustomed to them. Nature always negotiates on its own terms. As summer slowly deepens, the grain grows taller than your knees, then your waist. Eventually, the fields begin moving like quiet waves beneath the wind. Standing among them, you can hear thousands of stalks brushing softly against one another, a gentle whisper carried across the valley. It is one of the most peaceful sounds on the farm. A reminder that months of unseen work are finally becoming visible. The harvest remains some time away. Many things can still go wrong: an early frost, heavy rain, hungry animals, unexpected illness. Nothing has been guaranteed, but hope now grows taller each passing day. As evening settles across the fields, the setting sun paints the barley, rye, and oats in warm shades of gold, turning the valley into a sea of quiet light. You linger for one last moment, watching the grain sway peacefully beneath the northern sky. Soon these fields will face their greatest test, for no matter how carefully they have been tended, the weather will always have the final word. The fields now move like a quiet sea. Barley bows gently beneath the breeze. Rye stands tall against the rolling hills. Oats shimmer in the afternoon light, each slender stalk catching the sun before swaying back into the rhythm of the wind. From a distance, everything appears peaceful. The farm looks complete, healthy, almost secure. But every experienced Viking farmer knows better. The greatest challenge is rarely something you can see. It arrives from the sky, it rides upon the wind, it hides inside clouds that seem harmless until they drift overhead. You have worked faithfully through every season. You have cleared forests, raised buildings, turned the earth, planted every precious seed. Yet none of that gives you command over the weather. That power belongs to no one. You step outside before sunrise. The air feels unusually still. No birds sing. The leaves of the birch trees barely move. The silence itself feels different. Older members of the household notice it immediately. They pause their morning work and glance toward the western hills. No one speaks. Sometimes experience says enough without words. Far beyond the forest, dark clouds begin gathering. At first, they seem distant, small shadows resting against the horizon, but hour by hour they grow larger, slowly swallowing the pale morning sky. The light changes, the familiar golden warmth disappears beneath a cool gray blanket. Even the livestock begin behaving differently. The cattle stop grazing and lift their heads, sheep gather closer together without being called, the dog circles the yard, restless for reasons it cannot explain. Animals often notice storms before people do. You hurry through the day's chores. Loose tools are carried beneath shelter. Bundles of drying hay are stacked higher and covered as carefully as possible. Gates are checked once more. The roof is inspected. There is little panic, only quiet preparation. A Viking farmer learns long ago that storms cannot be stopped, only endured. The first drops arrive softly, almost politely. They tap against the wooden walls. They darken the dusty paths between the buildings. The thirsty fields welcome the rain. For a little while, soon the gentle shower becomes something heavier. Rain falls steadily across the valley, turning paths into streams of mud. The wind begins to rise. Tall barley bends lower with every passing gust. The roof above the longhouse hums as air rushes across the thick turf covering. Inside, everyone waits. The fire crackles gently. Children remain close to their parents. Outside, the world belongs entirely to the storm. Hours pass. Water pours from the roof edges. Nearby streams swell until they race through the valley with surprising strength. You cannot help the fields now. You cannot stand among the crops and protect each fragile stalk. The weather has become the farmer. All you can do is trust the work already completed. By morning, the storm has moved eastward. The air feels astonishingly fresh. Birdsong slowly returns. You step outside. Everywhere you look, the farm has changed. Some fences lean where the ground softened beneath them. Tree branches lie scattered across the pasture. Puddles reflect the brightening sky. The grain still stands, mostly. Some patches have been flattened by wind. Others remain untouched. You walk carefully through the fields, lifting bent stalks whenever possible, knowing that many will rise again if given time. Not every danger arrives with thunder. Some come quietly. A late spring frost can blacken tender shoots overnight. One unusually cold evening may erase weeks of patient growth. Before the sun rises again, then there are summers when rain simply refuses to come. Day after day, clear skies stretch endlessly overhead. At first, the warmth feels pleasant. Soon the soil begins to crack. Grass loses its rich green color. Streams shrink into narrow ribbons winding through dry stones. The animals search farther each day for fresh pasture. Water becomes more valuable than silver. Even experienced farmers cannot predict which year will bring too much rain or too little. The sky keeps its own counsel. There are smaller enemies as well. Tiny insects chew through tender leaves. Mice discover hidden grain stores. Mold creeps quietly into damp hay if it is gathered before drying properly. A single mistake, almost invisible at first, may reveal itself months later during the depths of winter. Risk never truly leaves the farm. It simply changes its shape. Yet something remarkable grows alongside every uncertainty. Resilience. Each difficult season teaches another lesson. Fields are planted in different places. Extra hay is stored whenever possible. Neighbors quietly help one another after especially hard storms. Knowledge passes from grandparents to children not through books, but through countless ordinary conversations beside the fire. Every challenge leaves behind wisdom. The land itself becomes the teacher. As evening approaches, sunlight finally breaks through the remaining clouds. Golden beams spill across the wet fields, making every droplet sparkle like tiny pieces of glass. The barley rises once more beneath the gentle breeze. The rye stands proudly despite the wind it has endured. The oats whisper softly as if nothing had happened at all. You realize that survival here has never meant controlling nature. It has always meant learning how to live beside it. Tomorrow, the weather may change again, or perhaps it will remain kind. No one can know. But life on the farm continues regardless, and as the last sunlight fades behind the hills, voices begin drifting from the longhouse, where another kind of strength quietly waits, the family whose shared labor makes every uncertain season worth facing together. The storm clouds have disappeared, the fields have recovered their quiet movement. Once again, the farm wakes beneath a pale northern sky, and the familiar sounds of daily life return. The cattle shift inside their shelter. Birds move between the fences. Smoke rises gently from the longhouse as breakfast begins, but a Viking farm has never survived because of one person alone. Behind every field, every animal enclosure, and every carefully stored basket of grain, there is a family working together, not always loudly, not always dramatically. Most of the time, their efforts are almost invisible. A hand repairing a torn sleeve, a child carrying water from the well, someone checking a fence before sunrise, someone remembering exactly where the best firewood was stored before winter arrived. A farm is not built only from timber and stone. It is built from countless small actions repeated every day. Inside the longhouse, life begins early. The central hearth glows softly, sending warmth into the wide room. Around it, different generations share the same space. Grandparents who have spent decades learning the moods of the land, parents carrying the responsibilities of keeping the household strong, children slowly discovering the skills they will one day depend upon. The longhouse is more than a place to sleep. It is a workshop, a dining hall, a shelter, a place where knowledge passes quietly from one generation to the next. Everyone has a role, but those roles are not always as simple as people today might imagine. A Viking farm requires flexibility. When harvest arrives, everyone helps gather grain. When animals need care, everyone notices. When a storm damages the roof, every capable hand contributes. The survival of the household matters more than any single person's usual task. You might spend one morning guiding oxen through the fields, and that same evening helping repair a fishing net or carrying heavy timber. The farm does not care what your usual responsibility is, it only cares what needs to be done. The older members of the family often become the keepers of experience. They know which fields drain poorly after rain. They remember winters that arrived earlier than expected. They recognize when an animal behaves strangely before illness becomes obvious. Their knowledge may not be written down, but it is valuable. A young farmer may have stronger arms, but an experienced farmer understands the land. Children grow up surrounded by this knowledge. They do not learn about farming from distant lessons. They learn by watching, by listening, by copying the movements of those around them. A child who carries a small bundle of sticks today may carry firewood for the entire household years later. A child who watches grain being stored will eventually understand how to protect the family's food supply. Growing up on a Viking farm means slowly becoming part of something larger than yourself. The household moves together like a single living thing. When one person struggles, others adjust. If someone becomes sick, another takes over their tasks. If someone grows older and cannot lift heavy loads anymore, their contribution changes. They may repair tools, teach younger family members, prepare food, share memories of earlier years. No one is truly useless. Every person holds a piece of the farm's survival. Even meals reflect this shared effort. The food on the table represents countless invisible steps. The bread comes from grain planted months earlier. The cheese comes from animals carefully protected through winter. The fire comes from wood gathered long before the cold arrived. A simple meal carries the labor of many hands. As evening approaches, the longhouse becomes quieter. The day's work is finished. Tools rest against the walls. The animals settle into their shelters. Outside, the fields disappear into darkness beneath the northern sky. Inside, the family gathers near the hearth. Stories are shared, not always about great heroes or distant adventures. Often they are about ordinary things. A particularly difficult harvest, a clever way to repair a broken tool, a winter when everyone worked together to save the animals. These memories become part of the family's identity. They remind everyone that survival is not only about strength. It is about cooperation. It is about knowing that someone else is standing beside you when the next challenge arrives. The farm may belong to a family, but it is also shaped by every person who contributes to it. Every footprint around the longhouse, every repaired fence, every planted seed, every meal shared beside the fire. Together, these small moments create a life that can continue beyond a single generation. And as the night deepens, while older voices fade into quiet, conversation near the hearth, another sound can be heard outside, the smaller footsteps of children moving through the farmyard, for they are not only watching this world, they are slowly learning how to carry it. The first light of morning touches the farm gently. Long before children understand the weight of the world around them, they become part of its rhythm. There are no separate places where childhood and responsibility are completely divided. On a Viking farm, growing up means slowly learning the skills needed to survive, not through hurried lessons, not through written instructions, but through watching, listening, and trying. A child wakes beneath the same wooden roof as everyone else. The sounds of the household are already beginning, the fire being rebuilt, the quiet movement of adults preparing for the day, the animals waiting beyond the walls. At first, the tasks given to children are small. Almost too small to notice. Carrying a few sticks toward the hearth, gathering fallen wool after sheep are sheared, bringing a wooden bowl to the table, watching over younger siblings. These simple actions may seem insignificant, but they are the first threads connecting a child to the life of the farm. Every skill begins somewhere. A young child learns the shape of the land by walking across it. They learn which paths become muddy after rain, which trees provide good firewood, which fences have loose sections where animals might escape. The farm becomes their first teacher. Outside the longhouse, the morning air feels sharp and fresh. Children follow behind older family members, their smaller footsteps leaving marks beside deeper tracks in the soil. They may not be strong enough to handle the heaviest tools yet, but they are always watching. A child helping with animals learns patience. A frightened lamb cannot be forced. A nervous calf must be approached carefully. Even goats teach lessons, usually by escaping whenever someone becomes careless. These moments create understanding. The animals are not simply possessions. They are living creatures that require attention. During warmer seasons, children spend much of their time near the fields and pastures. They help collect stones that appear after plowing. A single rock removed from the soil might make tomorrow's work easier. They gather herbs and plants known to be useful. They carry messages between family members working in different parts of the farm. They learn the names of nearby places. The stream, the forest edge, the safest path through the fields, the world around them slowly becomes familiar. For older children, the responsibilities become more demanding. A boy or girl who has spent years watching adults work may eventually begin helping with larger tasks, guiding animals, repairing simple fences, preparing food. spinning wool, assisting during harvest. The transition happens gradually. There is no single day when a child suddenly becomes an adult. Instead, responsibility arrives quietly, one extra task, one new skill, one more expectation, until one day, the child realizes they are no longer only watching, they are contributing. Winter creates a different kind of learning. When snow covers the fields and outdoor work slows, children spend more time inside the longhouse. The hearth becomes a classroom. They learn by observing hands moving through familiar tasks, how to mend damaged clothing, how to carve small wooden objects, how to preserve food, how to recognize useful materials. Even stories serve a purpose. An older family member may describe a difficult winter from many years ago, a year when supplies ran low, a season when everyone had to cooperate carefully. These memories are not only entertainment, they are warnings, lessons wrapped inside stories. Children learn that survival depends on preparation. A careless mistake today may become a serious problem months later. But childhood is not only work, there are moments of laughter, moments of freedom. Children chase one another between buildings, they race along the edges of fields, they explore forests where every fallen branch becomes a toy and every hidden path becomes an adventure. They watch birds build nests, they discover tiny creatures beneath stones. They create their own small worlds within the larger one their parents have built. Even in a life filled with responsibility, curiosity remains. Perhaps that is what makes these childhood years so important. A Viking child is not simply being trained to work, they are learning how to belong. The farm is not just a place where people live. It is a living connection between past and future. Every generation depends on the next one understanding it. As evening arrives, children return toward the warmth of the longhouse. Their clothes carry the scent of grass, smoke, and fresh earth. Their hands are tired. Their minds are full of new discoveries. Tomorrow, there will be more chores, more lessons, more small responsibilities waiting. And among those tasks, another important part of farm life continues quietly, the work of the women who preserve food, manage households, create clothing, and hold together many of the invisible foundations that allow the entire farm to survive. The morning arrives quietly, a thin line of golden light slips beneath the edge of the longhouse roof, touching the wooden floor before the rest of the household has fully awakened. Outside, the animals begin their familiar calls. Inside, another kind of work has already started. The farm may be surrounded by fields, fences, and grazing animals, but much of what allows it to survive happens within these walls. In Viking farm life, women are not simply watching the home while others work the land. They are among the people who keep the entire household functioning. Their work connects nearly every part of the farm together: food, clothing, storage, trade, animal care. The preservation of everything earned during the warmer months. Many of these tasks are quiet. Some leave behind no obvious mark, but without them, even the strongest harvest could quickly disappear. As the fire is rebuilt in the hearth, the day begins with preparation. The ashes from yesterday are moved aside. Fresh wood is placed carefully. A small flame grows into warmth that will eventually spread throughout the longhouse. Cooking begins slowly. Grain saved from the harvest is ground into flour. Dried ingredients are taken from storage. Milk collected from the animals will later become butter or cheese. Each action seems ordinary, yet every one represents knowledge gathered through years of experience. A Viking farm survives because someone understands what must happen before hunger arrives. Women often carried responsibility for managing household supplies. This required careful judgment. How much grain could be used today? How much needed to remain untouched for the months ahead? which foods would last until winter, which supplies needed to be protected from moisture, pests, or spoilage. A mistake made during summer might not reveal itself until the coldest part of the year. Preparation was its own form of survival. Beyond food, another essential craft filled the longhouse: textile work. The northern climate demanded warm clothing, and producing it required enormous patience. Wool from the sheep was cleaned, prepared, spun into thread, and woven into fabric. The process was slow. A single garment represented many hours of careful work. A heavy cloak protecting someone from winter winds was not simply clothing. It was the result of months of effort. Hands that had cared for sheep had also helped create the warmth those sheep provided. Nothing existed separately. The farm was a connected circle: the wool, the animals, the fields, the people. All depended upon one another. Spinning tools rested beside the hearth. A spindle turned gently between skilled fingers. The quiet movement continued through evenings when darkness arrived early and outdoor work became impossible. The sound became as familiar as the crackling fire itself. Women also played important roles in managing animals. While larger livestock tasks might require many hands, daily care often involved constant attention. Checking the health of animals, helping with births, collecting eggs, gathering materials needed for bedding and shelter. These responsibilities required observation. A small change in an animal's behavior could reveal illness before it became serious. A farmer who understood animals could prevent problems before they grew. A farmer who ignored them might lose valuable resources. On some farms, women also helped manage trade. Surplus products such as wool, woven goods, butter, cheese, and preserved foods could become valuable items exchanged at local markets. Skill created opportunity. A carefully woven piece of cloth could represent hours of labor and become something worth trading beyond the farm. The longhouse itself reflected this importance. The keys used to open storage chests were often symbols of responsibility and trust. Whoever controlled supplies held an important position within the household. Food stores were not just piles of grain and dried goods. They represented survival, planning, the future. As evening approaches, the work continues. The fields outside slowly disappear beneath the fading light. The animals settle. The tools are placed away. Inside, the hearth glows warmly while hands continue moving through familiar tasks. A torn garment is repaired. Tomorrow's food is prepared. The last details of the day are completed. To someone passing by from a distance, the farm might appear to be built from wood, stone, and earth, but that is only what can be seen. The true foundation is much deeper. It exists in the knowledge carried from one generation to another, in the careful decisions made when no one is watching, in the countless hours spent preserving what the farm has earned. And as the night settles over the valley, one of the most valuable resources of the household waits quietly for tomorrow: fresh milk from the animals that provide not only nourishment, but the ingredients that will become some of the most important foods on the Viking farm. The morning mist settles low across the pasture. The farm is still quiet when the first sounds begin to rise from the animal shelters. A wooden door opens. Fresh hay shifts beneath careful footsteps. A cow calls softly from within the byre, recognizing the beginning of another familiar routine. Before the fields can be tended, before tools are lifted, before the day's larger tasks begin, there is milk to collect on a Viking farm. Dairy work is not a small household chore. It is one of the daily foundations that keeps families strong through changing seasons. Milk is one of the few foods that arrives again and again, provided the animals remain healthy and the work is done with patience. But the process begins long before a wooden bucket is ever filled. It begins with the animals themselves. Cattle must be cared for throughout the year. During warmer months, they graze on open pasture, feeding on grasses and plants that grow across the northern landscape. When winter arrives, they depend on carefully stored hay gathered during the previous summer. Every bundle of dried grass represents preparation, every bucket of milk represents months of effort. You enter the byre as soft morning light begins reaching across the farmyard. The animals stand calmly, they know the routine. A wooden stool is placed beside one of the cows, the bucket is prepared, the work begins slowly. There is no rushing, a nervous animal will not cooperate, a distracted movement can spill precious milk. The farmer and the animal must understand one another. The sound is gentle, a steady rhythm echoing against wooden walls. Outside, birds call from the fence posts, the breeze moves through the grass. Inside, the warmth of the animals creates a peaceful contrast against the cool morning air. When the bucket is finally full, it is carried carefully back toward the longhouse. Not a single drop is treated casually. Fresh milk is valuable. Some will be used immediately. Some will be transformed into foods that can survive much longer. Because on a Viking farm, the challenge is not only producing food, it is preserving it. Butter is one of the most important products created from milk. The cream must first separate, then be worked patiently until it changes into something thicker and richer. The process takes time. A simple wooden container and steady movement can transform liquid cream into a food capable of lasting through difficult months. Butter provides valuable energy. A small amount can make plain meals far more satisfying. Cheese requires different skills. The milk is warmed carefully. Natural processes are encouraged, the solid part separate from the liquid, creating curds that can be shaped, pressed, and stored. The final product depends on experience. Too much moisture, and it may spoil. Too little care, and months of work may be lost. Those who make cheese learn through observation. The texture, the smell, the appearance, small details reveal whether everything has gone correctly. Some cheeses are eaten while still fresh, others are preserved longer, becoming an important source of food when the fields are covered in snow and animals provide less milk. The work continues beyond production. Containers must be cleaned, tools must be maintained, storage areas must remain cool and protected. Food preservation is a constant conversation between people and their environment. The cold northern climate can be a challenge, but it can also become an advantage. Cool temperatures help preserve certain foods naturally when they are stored correctly. The same environment that threatens survival also provides solutions throughout the day. Dairy work connects many parts of the farm together. The cattle require fields. The fields require preparation, the family requires food, the food requires careful hands. Everything returns to the same circle, nothing stands alone. Children may help carry smaller containers, older family members may inspect stored supplies. Everyone understands that dairy products are not created in one moment, they are the result of cooperation between animals, land, weather, and human effort. As evening arrives, the farm becomes quiet again. The milk has been collected, the butter has been stored, fresh cheese rests carefully where it can mature tomorrow. The process begins again. The same animals, the same careful movements, the same patience passed from one generation to the next. Yet, the morning begins with a sound that does not come from the fields, not from the animals, not from the rustling trees beyond the farm. It comes from the steady tap of wood and metal meeting beneath a small shelter near the longhouse. A tool is being repaired, and on a Viking farm, that simple act carries a meaning deeper than it first appears. Nothing here is easily replaced. A broken object cannot simply be thrown away and forgotten. Every axe, every knife, every farming blade, every wooden handle, each one represents time, skill, and valuable materials gathered from the land. When something breaks, the answer is not to find something new, the answer is to restore what already exists. You step into the small workshop beside the farmstead. The space is simple, the sturdy wooden bench, a collection of tools arranged carefully along the wall, pieces of iron, scraps of leather, wooden pegs, and carved handles waiting for another purpose. The smell of smoke, fresh wood, and heated metal fills the air. Here, patience becomes a skill. A farmer may spend hours repairing something that appears insignificant, a cracked wooden rake, a damaged bucket handle, a loose farming tool. But small failures often become large problems when ignored. A weak handle may break during the busiest day of harvest. A damaged blade may slow the work when every hour matters. A loose wheel on a cart may make transporting supplies almost impossible. Maintenance is not separate from farming, it is part of farming. You lift an old axe from the workbench. Its blade carries marks from countless seasons. It has cut firewood during freezing winters, cleared fields in spring, helped shape beams for buildings. The handle has been replaced more than once, but the iron head remains. A skilled craftsperson understands that tools carry history. They are not only objects, they are companions. The repair begins carefully. A damaged wooden section is removed. A new piece of timber is shaped by hand until it fits perfectly. The work requires attention. Too loose, and the tool becomes dangerous. Too tight, and the wood may split. Every movement must be measured. Nearby, a blacksmith works with iron. The forge glows softly. Hot metal changes color beneath the fire, becoming easier to shape. The sound of hammer against anvil travels across the farmyard. It is not a sound of destruction. It is a sound of renewal. A worn blade can become useful again. A broken piece of equipment can return to work. The ability to repair is a form of independence, but tools are only half of the farm's protection. The boundaries of the land require attention as well. Outside, the fences tell their own story. Some sections stand strong, others lean after months of wind, rain, and curious animals testing their limits. A fence is never truly finished. The weather slowly weakens it, animals push against it, the ground shifts beneath the posts. Every season leaves behind something that needs correction. You walk the perimeter of the farm, examining each section carefully. A single broken rail might not seem important, but livestock are always searching. A gap large enough for one curious animal can become a path for the entire herd. Soon, cattle may be wandering into crops. Goats may discover neighboring fields. A simple repair today prevents a much larger problem tomorrow. The damaged section is removed. Fresh wood is prepared. The new post is placed firmly into the earth. Hands press the soil around it until it stands securely again. The work is quiet, almost peaceful. There is satisfaction in seeing something restored. Not everything valuable must be created from nothing. Sometimes strength comes from preserving what already exists. As the afternoon passes, more small tasks appear. A door hinge needs adjustment. A storage box needs reinforcing. A leather strap needs stitching. None of these jobs are remembered in great stories. No songs are written about them. Yet they are the invisible actions that keep daily life moving. The survival of a Viking farm does not depend only on moments of great effort. It depends on thousands of ordinary decisions made correctly. A repaired tool, a secured fence, a careful inspection before problems grow. As evening settles over the valley, the workshop becomes quiet. The tools are placed back along the wall. The repaired axe rests beside the others. The new fence post stands firmly against the fading light. The farm looks almost unchanged. But small differences are everywhere. A stronger gate, a sharper blade, a safer enclosure. Tomorrow, the work will continue. The fields will need attention. The animals will need care, but beyond the farmyard, another challenge is slowly approaching. The days are becoming shorter, the air is growing colder, and soon, every household will turn its thoughts toward the most important task of all: preparing enough food and supplies to survive the long northern winter ahead. The first signs of winter rarely arrive with a single moment. They appear quietly, a colder breeze moving through the valley, a thin layer of frost resting on grass before sunrise, the evenings becoming darker a little earlier than before. The fields that once stretched beneath endless golden sunlight now stand almost empty, their harvest gathered and carried away. The farm begins to change, the busy movement of summer slows. The sounds of cutting grain and working outside gradually disappear, replaced by the quieter tasks that will determine whether the household thrives or struggles through the months ahead, because on a Viking farm, winter is not something you simply wait for. It is something you prepare for long before the first snow arrives. Inside the longhouse, storage areas become the center of attention. Wooden chests are opened, clay containers are inspected, shelves are cleaned. Every space where food can safely remain becomes valuable. The harvest that seemed so abundant only weeks earlier now looks much smaller when you imagine feeding an entire household through the cold months. This is the moment when careful planning reveals its importance. A farmer does not simply ask, "How much food do we have?" The more important question is, "How long will it last?" The grain stores are among the most carefully protected places on the farm. Barley, rye, and oats gathered during harvest must remain dry. Moisture is a silent enemy. A small amount of dampness can ruin precious supplies before anyone notices. The grain is cleaned and stored carefully, sometimes in raised buildings designed to protect it from water and unwanted visitors. Every sack represents months of work. The fields that were once green and moving beneath the wind are now preserved in these quiet stores. A bowl of porridge during a winter morning begins here. A loaf of bread beside the hearth begins here. Food storage is the bridge connecting one season to another. The same care is given to meat. Animals that cannot be kept through winter may be prepared before the cold becomes too severe. The timing requires judgment. Keeping too many animals means struggling to feed them. Keeping too few means losing valuable resources. Nothing is decided carelessly. The meat is preserved through methods that allow it to last. Salt, smoke, and cold air become important allies. Pieces are carefully prepared and stored where they can remain useful for many months. The smell of smoke slowly fills the longhouse. It settles into wooden beams. It clings to clothing. It becomes part of the memory of winter itself. Fish gathered from nearby waters may also become an important source of food. The northern landscape offers many possibilities, but every resource must be collected at the right time and protected afterward. The farm depends on knowing when to gather and when to save. Dairy products require attention as well. Fresh milk becomes less reliable during colder months, so preserved butter and cheese become especially valuable. A small piece of cheese stored today may provide comfort during a dark winter evening months later. These foods are not considered ordinary. They represent preparation, forethought, security. Even simple vegetables and plants are treated carefully. Roots, herbs, and other gathered foods may be dried or stored where they can provide variety during a season when fresh growth has disappeared. The winter landscape can feel empty, but a prepared household carries summer inside its walls. The colors of green fields, the taste of fresh grain, the richness of stored food, all preserved against the coming cold. As the days grow shorter, everyone takes part in preparation. Children help carry smaller supplies, older family members check containers and storage areas. Every person understands that these final weeks before winter are important. A forgotten task now may become a serious problem later. A. Damaged container, a poorly stored supply. A. Missed repair. The smallest details matter. Outside, the animals also require preparation. The byre is filled with fresh bedding. Stored hay is moved closer for easier access. Shelters are checked against wind and snow. The farm slowly closes itself against the coming season. The open spaces of summer become quieter. The fields rest beneath the cold sky. The forests grow still. Life moves inward. One evening, as the first real frost covers the ground, you stand near the storage building and look across the farm. Everything appears different. The same land that demanded so much effort throughout the year now waits silently beneath the coming winter. But inside the longhouse, there is warmth, there is food, there is the comfort of knowing that careful work has created a small shield against the uncertainty outside. Winter will still be difficult. No preparation can remove every challenge, but survival has never been about creating a perfect life. It has always been about being ready for an imperfect one. And as snow begins to threaten the distant mountains, another thought enters the minds of the household. The farm has stored what it needs to survive, but perhaps there are things it does not produce itself, things that must come from beyond these familiar fields, from the markets and neighbors who connect one Viking farm to the wider world. The winter winds have not yet fully arrived, but the farm has already begun to grow quieter. The fields rest beneath the changing sky. The animals move more slowly through the colder mornings. Inside the storage buildings, carefully preserved food waits behind wooden walls, protected for the months when the landscape becomes far less generous. Yet even the most prepared farm cannot provide everything. A family may grow grain, raise animals, make clothing, repair tools, but there will always be something missing, a material that cannot be found nearby, a tool that requires a skilled craftsperson, an object created by hands far beyond the valley. This is where the local market becomes important. For a Viking farmer, trading is not simply about buying and selling. It is about connection. It is about transforming the extra things the farm can produce into the things it cannot. On a cool morning, you prepare for a journey beyond the familiar fields. The wooden cart is checked carefully, the wheels are inspected, the ropes are tightened, nothing is rushed. A broken cart halfway along the journey could turn a simple trip into a difficult problem. Inside the cart are the farm's surplus goods, extra cheese carefully wrapped for protection, bundles of wool prepared from the summer's sheep, perhaps a few hides from animals that could not be kept through winter, maybe carved wooden objects made during quieter evenings beside the hearth. None of these things appeared overnight. Each one carries the work of many days. The wool came from animals that needed constant care. The cheese came from milk collected each morning. The wooden items came from trees shaped by patient hands. At the market, these ordinary farm products become valuable. The journey itself is part of the experience. The path may cross forests, open fields, and rocky ground. Other travelers appear along the way. A farmer from another valley, a craftsperson carrying tools, someone leading a small group of animals. Each person follows their own reason for traveling. The road becomes a moving collection of stories. Eventually, the market appears, not always a permanent town. Sometimes it is a gathering place that becomes alive only at certain times of the year, a quiet area near water, an open field, a sheltered harbor, a place where people know that others will come. The first thing you notice is the sound, not the noise of a crowded modern city. Something different, conversations passing between strangers, the movement of footsteps across packed earth, animals shifting beside wooden carts, the occasional strike of a hammer from a nearby craftsperson. The smell is different too, smoke from cooking fires, fresh bread, dried fish, wool, wood, salt. the sense of many places meeting together. Here, the world feels larger than the farm. You see objects you rarely encounter at home. Beautifully crafted tools, colored fabrics, jewelry, pottery, items created by people with skills developed through years of practice. Some goods may have traveled great distances before reaching this place. The market reminds you that even a small farm exists within a much wider network. Trading requires trust. There are no simple price tags waiting beside every object. People negotiate, they compare quality, they discuss what something is worth. A finely woven piece of cloth may be valued differently depending on its craftsmanship. A strong iron tool may be worth far more than a simple wooden object. Experience matters. Knowing the value of your own goods is an important skill. A farmer who understands this can make better decisions. A farmer who does not may lose valuable resources without realizing it. The market is also a place for information. Travelers bring news from distant settlements. Someone may describe an unusually harsh winter elsewhere. Another may mention a new trading route. Someone else may speak about changes in nearby communities. Long before written messages traveled quickly, people themselves carried knowledge from place to place. By afternoon, the trading is nearly complete. Some of your goods have become different objects, perhaps iron tools, a useful piece of cloth, a small item that will make life easier during the coming months. The cart feels different on the journey home. Not necessarily heavier, just changed. It now carries the connection between your farm and the wider world. As evening settles, the familiar shape of your longhouse appears in the distance. Smoke rises gently above the roof. The animals recognize your return. The farm feels exactly as you left it, yet somehow, the journey has changed your perspective. The valley is not isolated. It is one small part of a much larger landscape filled with other families, other farms, and other stories. And soon, as winter deepens, those nearby families will become even more important, because survival in the northern world has never depended on one household standing alone. Sometimes, the greatest strength comes from the people living just beyond your own fields. The first true signs of winter are beginning to settle across the valley. The fields have become quiet. The golden movement of grain is gone, replaced by dark earth resting beneath the cold sky. Smoke rises more often from the longhouse, and the paths between farms grow softer with frost each morning. This is the season when the distance between neighbors feels smaller. During the busiest months, everyone is focused on their own land, their own animals, their own harvest. But when the fields no longer demand every hour of daylight, people begin looking beyond their own fences again, because a Viking farm may appear independent. Yet no household truly survives alone. A neighbor might lend a tool when yours breaks, help move a heavy beam during repairs, share knowledge after an unusual storm, offer assistance when illness prevents someone from working. These relationships are not simply friendships, they are part of survival. You know the farms around you by their familiar signs, a particular smoke rising from a distant roof, the sound of cattle from a nearby pasture, the shape of a field cut into the hillside. Some neighbors live close enough that a short walk connects your homes. Others may be farther away, requiring a longer journey through forests and valleys, but everyone understands the same reality. The land is difficult, the seasons are uncertain, and cooperation often makes the difference between hardship and recovery. Yet living close to others also creates problems. Shared land requires careful understanding. Where does one person's pasture end and another's begin? Who has the right to use a certain woodland? Which stream can provide water for animals? These questions matter. A small disagreement over boundaries can become much larger if left unresolved. The land provides everything people need. That is exactly why people care so deeply about it. A field is not simply empty ground. It represents food, security, a future for children, a promise that the family will remain connected to the place they call home. Sometimes disputes begin quietly. An animal wanders into another person's crops. A fence is moved slightly over time. Someone collects more firewood from a shared forest than others believe is fair. At first, these may seem like small problems, but in a world where resources are limited, even small problems can create tension. The response is usually not immediate anger. Most communities understand that everyone depends on everyone else eventually. Instead, disagreements may be discussed among respected members of the community, people who have experience, people whose judgment is trusted. The goal is often not punishment, it is balance, finding a solution that allows people to continue living beside one another, because tomorrow's neighbor may be the person who helps rebuild your barn after a storm, the person who shares extra supplies during a difficult winter, the person who watches your animals when your family cannot. Maintaining peace has practical value. It protects the entire community. Shared work also brings people together. During harvest, many hands can transform a difficult task into something manageable. A family with fewer workers may depend on others arriving to help. Later, they return the favor when another household needs assistance. This exchange creates bonds stronger than simple trade. Everyone remembers who arrived when help was needed. Everyone remembers who offered support when times were uncertain. Beyond farms, communities often share important spaces, paths through forests, grazing areas, water sources, places where people gather. These shared landscapes become part of everyday life. Children learn the routes between neighboring farms. Adults know which households they can visit during emergencies. Older generations remember past disagreements and the lessons they created. The landscape itself holds these memories. A certain field may be known because of an old dispute. A particular tree may mark a traditional meeting place. A path through the woods may have been used for generations. Places become connected to stories. As evening settles, you stand outside the longhouse watching distant lights flicker from nearby homes. Each small glow represents another family preparing for winter. Another group of people facing the same cold winds, another household hoping the coming months will be kind. From a distance, the farms seem separate, but they are connected by invisible threads. Shared work, shared knowledge, shared dependence. The northern landscape may be harsh, but it is made less lonely by the people living within it, and as winter approaches, another reality becomes impossible to ignore. Even with preparation, cooperation, and careful planning, life on a Viking farm remains fragile. A sudden illness, a serious injury, a moment of bad luck, any of these could change everything. And when the body itself becomes the obstacle, the strength of the farm is tested in a completely different way. The valley has grown quieter now. Winter is approaching with steady footsteps. The fields rest beneath a pale sky. The animals spend more time sheltered indoors. The longhouse becomes the center of daily life, glowing warmly against the cold darkness outside. From a distance, the farm appears peaceful, safe, almost untouched by the difficulties that shaped every season before it. But those who have lived here longest understand something important. A farm is never completely free from danger. The greatest threats are not always dramatic. They often arrive quietly. A cough that refuses to disappear, a cut that becomes worse instead of healing, a fall from a roof, a strained back after years of heavy work. In a world without modern medicine, small problems could become serious very quickly. You wake one morning and notice something unusual. The usual sounds of the household are different. Someone who normally rises early remains beside the hearth. Someone who usually carries water walks more slowly. the absence of a familiar routine is immediately noticed. On a Viking farm, every person matters. When one person cannot work, others must adjust. A sick family member does not simply lose a day's effort. Their tasks must be carried by someone else. A different person feeds the animals, someone else prepares food, another checks the fields or repairs what needs attention. The household changes its rhythm. Illness affects everyone. The northern environment creates many challenges. Cold weather can make sickness harder to endure. Smoke from indoor fires, while necessary for warmth and cooking, can fill the longhouse and affect breathing over time. Crowded living spaces mean illnesses can spread between family members, yet Viking communities were not helpless. They carried knowledge passed down through generations. Plants and herbs were gathered for different purposes. Warm drinks were prepared, rest was encouraged, simple treatments were used based on experience. Much of this knowledge came from careful observation of the natural world. Which plants were useful, which foods helped restore strength, which practices brought comfort during recovery. Some remedies may have helped. Others may have been based more on tradition than true healing. But behind them all was a desire to understand the human body and care for those who were suffering. Injuries were another constant part of farm life. The work itself carried risks, an axe slipping while cutting wood, a heavy stone moving unexpectedly, an animal becoming frightened, a fall while repairing a roof or building. Every tool that made life easier could also become dangerous when handled carelessly. The same strength needed to survive could sometimes create harm. A farmer's hands were among the most important tools they possessed. They shaped wood, guided animals, prepared food, built homes. So when those hands were injured, the entire household felt the impact. Some injuries healed with time, others changed a person's abilities permanently. An older farmer might no longer lift heavy beams but could still teach younger workers. Someone unable to manage certain tasks might become responsible for different ones. Life required adaptation. A person's value did not disappear simply because their body changed. Animals created their own dangers as well. Cattle were powerful creatures. Even calm animals could become unpredictable. A frightened horse or angry bull could cause serious harm. Goats could create trouble by escaping. Dogs protecting the farm might sometimes mistake a harmless visitor for a threat. Every creature required understanding, respect, attention. Winter brought additional dangers. Ice made paths dangerous. Cold temperatures threatened those caught outside too long. A simple journey between farms could become difficult during heavy snowfall or storms. The landscape that provided everything needed for survival could also become unforgiving. Yet despite all these risks, fear was not the feeling that defined farm life. Instead, there was awareness. People understood the dangers around them. They learned from experience. They prepared as best they could. They watched over one another. A person working alone was vulnerable. A community offered protection. As evening settles, the longhouse grows warm with the sound of quiet conversation. Someone recovering from illness rests near the hearth. Another person completes the chores they normally would have done. The farm continues, not perfectly, not without difficulty, but through cooperation, through patience, through people caring for one another. When life becomes uncertain, outside, the snow begins falling softly, the world becomes still, the hardest months are approaching. Soon, the farm will enter the deepest part of winter. When daylight is short and every stored resource becomes precious, the fields may sleep beneath ice and snow, but the people inside the longhouse must remain prepared, because surviving winter is not only about having enough food, it is about protecting everything that allows the farm to begin again when the earth finally awakens. The first true snow arrives quietly, not with a great storm, not with a sudden transformation, just a few white flakes drifting down from a grey northern sky, landing softly upon the rooftops, the fences, and the fields that only months earlier were filled with moving grain. The farm has entered a different world. The open spaces of summer feel distant now. The fields rest beneath a blanket of cold. The paths between buildings are marked by footprints instead of wagon tracks. The sounds of harvesting and planting have been replaced by the slower movements of winter preparation, but winter does not begin when the snow arrives. For a Viking farmer, winter begins much earlier. In every repair completed, every bundle of hay stored, every piece of food carefully preserved, every decision made when the days were still warm, now, those preparations are put to the test. You step outside the longhouse into the cold morning air. The first task is checking the animals. The livestock are among the farm's most valuable possessions, and keeping them healthy through winter requires constant attention. The byre must remain dry, fresh bedding is added. Openings are checked to prevent harsh winds from entering while still allowing enough air to move through the shelter. The animals breathe clouds into the cold air as they shift quietly inside. Their survival depends on the care given months before. The hay storage becomes especially important. During summer, countless hours were spent cutting and drying grass. Now, those efforts become the difference between having enough food and facing difficult choices. Each bundle is precious. Too much waste can create problems later. The hay must be protected from moisture. The supply must be measured carefully. There is always a balance between using enough and saving enough. The same careful thinking continues throughout the farm. The roof of the longhouse is inspected once more. Winter winds can find the smallest weakness. A damaged section of turf or wood may allow cold air and water inside. A simple repair now prevents a much larger problem later. The fences are checked, the gates are strengthened, paths are cleared where possible. The farm slowly closes itself against the season. Inside the longhouse, preparations continue. The storage areas are examined again, not because anyone has forgotten what is there, but because winter requires constant awareness. Food supplies are counted, containers are checked, firewood is arranged where it can be easily reached. During the darkest months, the hearth becomes more than a source of warmth. It becomes the center of daily life, a place where meals are prepared, clothing is repaired, stories are shared, plans are made. The rhythm of the household changes. Summer was a season of movement. Winter becomes a season of patience. People spend more time indoors. The same hands that worked fields and cared for animals now turn toward quieter tasks. Wool is spun, tools are repaired, wood is carved, knowledge is passed between generations. The farm may appear less active from the outside, but inside the longhouse, life continues. There is a special feeling that comes when everything has finally been prepared, a moment when the household can look around and recognize the results of an entire year's effort. The grain stored safely, the animals sheltered, the tools repaired, the walls strengthened, the supplies protected. None of these achievements happened in a single day. They came from hundreds of small choices: a farmer who gathered extra firewood months earlier, a child who helped carry supplies, a family member who repaired a damaged container instead of ignoring it, a neighbor who offered assistance when it was needed. Winter reveals the importance of every action. As darkness arrives earlier each evening, the world outside becomes quieter. The fields disappear beneath snow. The forest grows still, the animals rest, the farm seems to enter a deep sleep, but this silence is not emptiness. It is a pause, a waiting period. Beneath the frozen ground, the earth is preparing for another beginning, and within the longhouse, people are doing the same. They wait, they endure, they remember. The winter ahead will bring cold mornings, limited daylight, and moments of difficulty. but it will also bring something else: time to rest after a year of labor, time to repair what has been worn down, time to tell stories of the seasons that have passed, time to dream about the fields that will one day become green again. As you stand near the doorway of the longhouse, watching snow settle across the familiar landscape, the farm no longer feels like a place fighting against nature. It feels like a place living alongside it. The year has come full circle, from the first seeds planted in dark soil to the final preparations beneath falling snow. Everything has led to this quiet moment, and soon, as the deepest winter surrounds the farm, there will be only one thing left to do: to sit beside the warmth of the hearth and remember the journey that brought everyone here. The winter has finally settled over the valley. The farm that once moved with endless activity now rests beneath a blanket of snow. The fields are silent, the paths are covered, the trees stand still against the pale northern sky. From a distance, the Viking farm appears almost frozen in time, but inside the longhouse, life continues. The fire burns softly in the center of the room, sending warm light across wooden walls and familiar faces. Outside, the wind moves across the snow-covered landscape, carrying the sound of a season that demands patience. This is the quietest time of the year, the time when the work of the past months becomes visible, the grain stored safely, the animals protected from the cold, the tools repaired, the walls strengthened, the food carefully preserved. Everything surrounding the family is a reminder of countless small efforts made when the days were brighter. A Viking farmer does not measure success only by wealth or possessions. Success is found in something much simpler: a warm fire at the end of a difficult day, enough food to share, healthy animals resting nearby, family gathered together beneath a strong roof, a farm surviving another cycle of the seasons. Life here is not easy. The land demands patience. The weather offers no promises. A single storm, a poor harvest, or an unexpected illness can change everything. Yet people return to the fields every year. They plant again, they rebuild again, they prepare again, because farming is not only about growing crops, it is about believing in a future you cannot see yet. A seed placed into the soil is an act of hope. A repaired fence is a promise that tomorrow matters. A stored piece of grain is a quiet message sent from one season to another. The Viking farmer lives between uncertainty and trust, between the wildness of nature and the comfort of human effort. Outside the longhouse, snow continues falling. The same landscape that challenged the family for an entire year now appears peaceful. The fields that once required strength now offer rest. The forests that provided timber and fuel stand quietly in the distance. The rivers that carried movement and trade now flow beneath layers of ice. Everything has entered a pause, and perhaps that pause is what makes the cycle meaningful. Without winter, there would be no anticipation of spring. Without hardship, preparation would have no purpose. Without uncertainty, the small moments of comfort would not feel so valuable. Inside the longhouse, stories continue. Older generations remember farms from long ago. They describe summers when the harvest was generous, winters when the cold seemed endless, years when families struggled, years when they celebrated. These memories become part of the farm itself. The land is not only shaped by hands, it is shaped by stories, by people who stood in the same fields before, by footsteps that disappeared beneath new seasons, by generations who trusted the earth enough to begin again. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson of the Viking farmer. Not that life was simple, it was never simple. Not that nature was conquered, it never was. The lesson is that people learned how to belong within a difficult world. They adapted, they observed, they worked together. They accepted that some things were beyond their control, and they found meaning in the things they could influence. A small farm in the northern landscape may seem insignificant compared to kingdoms, battles, and famous names remembered by history. But behind every great civilization were ordinary people, people who planted seeds, people who cared for animals, people who built homes, people who woke before sunrise and worked until the light disappeared. Their lives were not recorded in grand stories, yet without them, history itself could not continue. So as the fire slowly burns lower and the night grows deeper, the Viking farm rests, waiting, breathing, preparing for another spring that has not yet arrived. Soon, the snow will melt, the fields will awaken, new seeds will return to the soil, and another farmer, standing beneath another northern sky, will begin the same ancient journey once again, a journey written not with ink, but with footsteps across the earth. And perhaps, when we look back through the centuries, the most surprising thing is not how different their lives were from ours, but how familiar they feel, because beneath the old wooden roofs and forgotten landscapes, the hopes were the same: to protect what matters, to care for those nearby, to create something that lasts beyond a single lifetime. And somewhere, beneath the frozen soil of the old Viking farms, the memory of those quiet hands still remains.